Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode, we started working on our resource gathering system and we created our supply center prefab. We can see it over here, but we still don't have any kind of unit that will go harvest and return back to the supply center. So this is what we're going to do in this episode. We are going to have a few more episodes for the resource gathering because it's kind of a major system. So we want to create this harvester, this unit that will basically be spawned inside the supply center, go to some kind of node, and go back. So we are going to take our infantry unit. I simply make sure this infantry unit is saved. So you go to the overrides, apply all, it will be saved. And then you can duplicate it. So Control D, drag it over here. You can also move it a bit and unpack it so it will not affect the original prefab. Now we're going to rename this to Harvester. But if you have some kind of medieval game, it can also be like a citizen or a worker or any kind of unit that will basically gather resource. So we're going to name it Harvester, and now we need to change the actual model. So we're going to remove this soldier mesh because we don't need it anymore. We're going to remove this BIP001. This is just for the animation, I guess. We're going to remove this, and we're only going to have the main harvester, which has all the different scripts, and we also have this indicator, and we have the unit UI. So for the model, we're going to open our general's assets. We're going to open Europe, vehicles, and EU construction unit. Now I just need to play around with these. They will not always match the exact thing that I want. But because I'm using this pack, I need to find something suitable. Obviously in your game, it can be another unit. It can be something else. I'm going to use this, let's say, tractor. So I'm going to drag it into the scene first. And I want to make sure that it's going to be in a good size. So make sure it's bigger than the unit, but it can still fit over here because we want it to go over here and deposit the resources. So we're going to click on the actual model. Why did I go out? Vehicles, construction unit. On the actual model, we're going to click on the scale factor. And this is with my testing. I saw that 0.18 is a nice size. For you, obviously, it's going to be 1. So just change it to whatever you want. But again, you will probably have your own models. So change it to 0.18 and apply. And then you're going to have it in this size. Now we're going to drag it to be a child of this harvester. We're going to 0 the position. And we're going to keep the scale because this is the scale that we basically used. Otherwise, it's going to be very small. So 5, 5, 5. And we're going to keep it at this size. Now we also want to match the indicator to be big enough, otherwise it's not going to be visible. So we're going to change the size of the indicator to be about 4, 4, 4. And now if we activate it, we can see that it's visible and big enough. So now we can deactivate it. For the unit UI, it should be above the unit, so we don't need to play with this too much. But also make sure that you do have a reference over here inside the unit script for the health tracker. It should not lose the reference, but if it lost the reference, just drag the health tracker inside. Now we're going to keep most of these scripts over here and components because it's going to have the same functionality as the unit besides the harvesting functionality. What we don't want is this attack controller because it's not going to attack. So we're going to remove this, but we're going to keep the direction indicator, the unit movement, the unit script, the animator, and all the other things. We do want to change the unit controller in a second because we don't want to use the same state machine as our unit. We're going to use another state machine. What we also want to do is increase the capsule collider, because if we click on it, it's very small. So we're going to increase it to about 2.5, okay? Can even make it a bit smaller, 2.2. And we also have the sphere collider, but this is just for the area of detection, okay? So it has nothing to do with the actual model. We can make it a bit smaller, let's say 7. It doesn't really matter. This will detect the enemy, but for our harvester, it doesn't really matter because it should not detect enemies, only if it's attacked. So we're going to make it a bit smaller. Now we're also going to make sure it's clickable, right? Because it's a unit. And if at this, oh yes, of course, also unpack this from being a prefab and rename this to model or something like that. Now let's just see that everything, yes, we have all of this. Now we can run the game and we can basically control this harvester the same way we control the unit. And it doesn't really need, what is going on here? What's this? Oh yes, of course. Because it's trying to use the unit animator, and the unit animator has this attack state, and the attack state is using the attack controller, and we deleted the attack controller from our harvester. It's going to give us an error, so just remove this unit controller and say none, okay? For now. So if we run the game, we're going to have the same functionality as the unit. We can move it around, and we don't even need any kind of animation because it's not like he's walking, right? The unit needs to move his legs, but this tractor needs to simply move.
Reporting. Agreed.
And it looks like it's animated, although it's not really moving anything.
As you wish. Of course.
We can select both of them. Now, if they collide together and they're very close, we can increase this obstacle avoidance, maybe increase it to 2.
As you wish. As you wish. Agreed.
Right, you can play around with this, but this is not the point of this episode. Basically, now we have the same functionality, so it uses the unit selection manager, the unit selection box, but we're going to have to change this a bit later. So for example, it will not attack anything, even if we hover over an enemy. We're going to deal with this later. For now, we want to add the harvesting functionality. So for this, we're going to create a harvester script. Harvester. And we're going to drag it on the harvester. We're going to open it, and I'm going to provide you a link for the entire script because it's rather long and I don't want to waste time. So you're going to get a link to this code over here. Just copy everything and make sure you select all the different braces and paste it inside your script. Now you're going to have this error, and this is just because we still don't have this class. So go back over here and let's create this class very quick. C# resource node. So inside the resource node, we don't need much. We just want to have a float. Float resources. And let's say we have 100. So this is the max amount. Then we also want to have a public float depletion rate. This is 1, but maybe you want it to depend on the actual harvester and not the node. Let's just keep it at 1. Then we also want to have a float actually a bool, is depleted. So this will be some kind of property that is going to be updated in real time. And if you did not know, C# has this thing that you can basically create a property that is updated in real time. So we can do this thing over here and then say resources is bigger than 0. And it means that if resources will be bigger or actually smaller than 0, then this will become false. If this is bigger than 0, then this will be true. So this will always get updated. So we don't need to do, let's say, update if resources is smaller than 0, then depleted is true, else is depleted is false. So we don't need to do this inside the update method and always keep checking. We can simply do this. And this will change. So if resources is changing, then this will also change. And this is a nice feature that we never actually used. Now we also need one method that will be harvest. Because this will happen, let's say, in the update method, so it will keep decreasing the amount. So we don't want it to go to -1. It will simply go back to be 0 again. And then when resources will become 0, it will also know it over here and it will make is depleted true. So we don't need to do this. Is depleted true, right? We don't need to do this because it will automatically happen when this is true. So this is what we need inside the resource node. Now, before we go over this script, we want to create some kind of placeholder for our resource node. Later, maybe in the next episode, I'm going to add some visuals to it. I don't know if it's going to be like diamonds or maybe some other resource, although you can create whatever you want. It can be anything. It can be trees. It can be just some kind of mining nodes. And then when it's depleted, you can change the model, right? Maybe this node, it will have this script. You can say if resources is 50, then change the model to something else. If resources is 0, then destroy this node or make it use another model. If it's 100, then make it the initial model. So you can play around with this. You can add animations. I don't know what I'm going to do, but this is basically something that will go on each resource node. For now, we're going to make it very simple. We're going to have this kind of cube that will be flat. And we're going to give it some kind of material. Let's say this yellow one. And of course, later it should have a model inside and you can simply disable the mesh render. So it will be much more appealing, right? We don't need something like this. We're going to rename this to be node. And then we're going to drag the resource node script on it. And we also want to disable the box collider. Well, actually, we want to keep this box collider, but we're going to make it trigger, right? Because we want to trigger this event. Another thing is that if we leave it at default, well, it's going to work, but you can also give it another. Eventually, we're going to basically click with our mouse on this node and the harvester will go and start harvest. So we need a way to detect this node. What we can do is create some kind of layer that is named node. I named it resources, but I don't like it. So let's just go over here and rename it to node. And then you're going to set it to be on this layer. But the problem is now if we go to the game, it's not going to be visible. When you're doing this for the first time, when you're adding a new layer, just go over here to the main camera, click on the calling mask and add this layer as well. And you can see over here that it's not visible, but when we add it, it becomes visible, okay? So don't forget this. Also, we don't want to make this box collider too big because we want to make sure that the harvester actually gets into the middle and starts harvesting. We don't want it to start harvest when it just reaches the border. So we can make it even smaller, something like this. Or maybe the entire node will be very big and then it will reach the center. Okay, something like this. Another thing that we want to do is basically have some kind of location inside our supply center that the harvester will go to deposit all the resources. So we're going to simply duplicate this node. We're going to rename it to supply drop. And we're going to move it over here into this spot. Now we can basically deactivate this because we don't want this yellow thing, but we know that it's over here. So he will basically go harvest and then he will go over here and deposit all the different things. Now it's still not inside the supply center. So let's expand our supply center and drag this supply drop inside. Let's first enable it and just reset the position and then reposition it again over here. Make sure it's on the ground. And now we can disable this. We don't want this thing over here, so we're going to remove the resource node. And this will basically just be a transform, right? It's just a transform that we're going to assign to our harvester, and he will know to go over here and deposit all the resources. Now we're going to have a problem because, first of all, our supply center has this box collider. So I don't remember if I did this in the previous episode or I did this on my own time, but if the box collider is over here, the harvester will not be able to get into this area. So just make sure the box collider is allowing this, okay? And another problem is that inside the supply center and basically every prefab we have, inside the models, we have this nav mesh obstacle. And this obstacle basically prevents the nav mesh agents from passing through this building. But now it will also prevent them from going over here. And this will be disabled at first. When we just start the game, this will be disabled. And then when we place the building, it will enable it. Right? Because we can see this inside our buildings script. Building system. Let's click on the supply center, constructible. Here, when we place the constructible, it activates the obstacle, and this basically takes this nav mesh obstacle and it looks for it in the children and it enables it. Because we don't want this enabled when it's still in preview mode. But the problem is that this entire object will have this nav mesh obstacle. So for this, we're basically going to create another one inside the models. We create some kind of 3D object. And we're going to make sure that, let's just rotate this. Let's expand this. Okay, so it will take this entire part and we can rename this to obstacle. Obstacle, right? And we're going to duplicate this and add another one over here. Otherwise, the harvester will go over this crane and we don't want him. We want him to go over here. So we're going to add this obstacle, and we also want to add an obstacle over here. So again, duplicate this, move this over here, and now he will avoid all of this, but he will go into this area. Now we can add this nav mesh obstacle to all of these obstacles. So we can select all of them and add nav mesh obstacle. And now all of them will have this nav mesh obstacle, and we can delete it from the main object because it will prevent the harvester from going here. Now, of course, we don't need this ugly box, so we will simply remove the mesh renderer, and also here, and also here. Now, I hope that this will find all of them and disable them, and not only one of them. So maybe it's not going to work initially. Maybe we need to create some kind of loop that will look for all the components and not only one. So I'm not sure, but we'll basically take these ones and it will disable them. Now let's just make sure if we go to our command center, yes, you can see that it's disabled at the start and it only gets activated when we place it. So it's probably from my testing, I forgot to disable these. Make sure these obstacles are disabled at first. Okay. So we should not have any kind of obstacles on these models over here like we used to have. You can see this. This is removed. When we save the prefab, it will get removed. But for these obstacles, we do want these obstacles and we also want to disable them at first. Now we're going to click on the actual prefab and we're going to apply all. And now it's going to add them as part of this prefab, and it's also going to remove the obstacle that we had. And now it should allow the harvester to go over here, but it will avoid these parts of the model. And again, this is just relevant for this model. If you have other models and they look differently, you can apply the same logic. Now, if we also run the game, now before we create the actual functionality for the harvester, if we run the game, let's make sure that, okay, so the animator is not playing because we still don't have an animator, but
Awaiting
if we click
orders
over
as you
here,
wish.
so we can see it can go over here, but if we click over here, it will not pass through this building, it will go around.
As you wish.
Or will it? Okay, so if we click, yes, so we can see that it did not activate them. Interesting. It did not activate them. Oh, I'm a fool. Of course it did not activate them. This is being called only when the constructible is placed. We did not place this. This was already placed, okay? So obviously it's not going to work. This is good, okay? Keep these obstacles disabled. Save the supply center, delete it, and now we're simply going to build it and it's going to work. Of course, later, when we build the supply center, it will automatically build this unit. And now they should be enabled, so we can go over here. But if we click over here, it will go around.
As you wish.
So it's kind of buggy because we need to maybe, let's see. Yes, they are enabled. Oh, okay. So it only enabled one and it did not enable all of them. And this is what I was afraid of because it will only get one and not all of them. So we can say something like this. Let me think. And of course, it's kind of obvious. I'm saying get component in children, not get components. We also have this method. This will get us all the different components. Now, this is not going to work because we have this obstacle, which is just a single obstacle. I don't know why we need this as a global variable. We're not using it anywhere else. Let's just cut this and paste this inside. Okay? Or even do something like this. So you can see that this will work because it gets only one component and will get the first component. I think we deleted something. Okay. So it will only get the first component and it will ignore the rest of them, right? It will get this one, it will activate it, but for these ones, it will not activate them because we only get one component. But we can use this method, get components in children, but this time we also need to make this into an array. And now it's going to work. So now it's going to be obstacles. It's going to get all the obstacles. And all we need to do is basically create some kind of loop. So for each navmesh obstacle, in obstacles. So we loop over this list. Obstacle, enabled, true. So now we do this for all the different obstacles. And that's it. So I hope that now it's going to work. We're going to build the building. And if we click on it, all the different obstacles were enabled. Okay? And now,
Yes,
if
sir.
we go over
Of
here,
course.
it will allow us to enter this part. But if we click over here, I really hope that it will go around.
Agreed. 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 As you wish. As you
So
wish.
I don't know why.
Agreed. Of course. Of course. Agreed. Agreed.
Well, if we click over here, it will go. If we
Agreed.
click over
As you
here,
wish.
it will still try to go around. Maybe we should add some kind of, what if we do something like this?
Agreed. Agreed. Of course.
I usually use this carve functionality.
Of course. Agreed.
Okay, so this is the trick. Yeah. Basically allowing the carve, if you click over here, it will, if we disable the carve, it will create an obstacle, but it will not actually work with the navmesh surface. So if we disable the carve, you can see it does create this obstacle, but it's not really working great with the navmesh surface. So that's why we have this weird functionality. What we're going to do is we're going to select our supply center. We're going to go to these obstacles and we're going to enable carve. Now, if you also have other ones like the power plant and you have, let's say, this navmesh obstacle, you can also enable carve. Carve will simply work better with the navmesh surface and the navigation. Let's also do this for the command center. Carve. And let's hope it actually works. So you can see that this blue thing is the navmesh surface. This is what the agent is moving on. And if we build this, it will automatically, okay, so we're going to have a problem. It will carve it all around and not only, so you can see now we have a problem, it will go around.
Of course.
It will not get closer.
Of course.
So you can play around with this obstacle, right? The problem is that the obstacle on the command center is on this model, and this model takes this entire area, and it also has this box collider. Well, it's not this box collider, it's this thing over here. So if you want to test this, you can simply enable the obstacle and you can see it carving the area, and then you can play around with these things. You can create a capsule and then carve. You can change the size. Okay, so this is better. And you can play around with this, and now all you need to do is disable it and it will be enabled when we place it. Let's also save the prefab. Then for the power plant, the same thing. we enable it, it will carve it this way. This is too much. We can play around with the size. And again, you can also use a capsule, so it will be much more precise. And let's disable this. And of course, save the prefab. And for the supply center, we already have this working because we have these separate obstacles. So if we enable this, it will carve here, and then it will also carve here, and it will also carve here. But this part will be walkable for the harvester. We can play around with this a bit more. Maybe we can change the size, like make it a bit wider, and also this thing over here. We can also take this entire thing and do something like this. Right, you can play around with this. And now we're going to disable these. And they will be activated when we actually place them. So now let's save this entire supply center. Delete it, and let's test this.
Yes, sir. Agreed.
And if we click,
Agreed.
it will go around. So if you don't want it to actually intersect with the building, you can increase the buffer zone.
As you wish.
But now it acts as we want. So you can see that it's really scratching the surface. Let's just make this a bit wider so this margin is a bit wider, and then the harvester will not okay, something like that. Now, of course, disable them and apply the changes and delete the supply center.
Awaiting orders, of course. As you wish.
So now you can see it will not hit the walls. So now we have our harvester, and at this point it doesn't do much because it still doesn't have any kind of state machine. We deleted the state machine, the controller that we had, and we need to create a new one. Eventually, when we start the game and we build our first supply center, it will create the harvester, it will spawn it, and the harvester will get a reference to the supply center. You can see that it doesn't have any reference. It will get a reference to the supply center because it will be the one instantiating it. Then when we are going to select the harvester and click on a node, it will also get this assigned node reference and will know to go to this node, harvest it, and go back to the supply center because it has both of these references. At this point, it's not going to do it because we still don't have these references, and obviously we don't have any kind of state machine. In the next episode, we are going to create a state machine for the harvester, but before that, and this will only happen in the next episode, but in this episode, let's just go over the script. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we basically have these references for the assigned node and the supply center. We have the harvest amount per second. Now again, you can play around with this. You can give different resources, different harvest amounts per second, right? Something can be faster or slower. You can have a max capacity of your harvester. So this is the amount of resources he can carry. Then you can also, this is the current capacity. We have references to the animator and to the agent, and we have this bool to track if it's depositing. Then inside the update method, we can set these different bools, and all of these bools will be inside of our animator. So for now, it doesn't make much sense because we don't have the animator, but our animator is going to be influenced by these bools, and they are going to be influenced by the capacity and the current capacity and whether we have an assigned node. We also check if we have an assigned node. We have these methods move to, harvest, deposit, and all of these will be triggered from the state machine. If it needs to move, it's going to move the agent. If it needs to harvest, it will start harvest the resource, and it's going to add to the capacity, and it's going to start this method inside the resource node, right? The harvest method that we created. Then we also have deposit. It's going to basically start the coroutine, and it's going to start depositing everything it has into the supply center. Then we're going to convert it into credits or whatever. And we also have this on trigger enter and on trigger exit. So when we enter into a node, it's going to set this to be true. When we enter into a supply center, it's going to set this to true. And where we're going to exit, it's going to do the opposite and set this to false. Most of this doesn't make sense because we still don't have any state machine, but we're going to do this in the next episode. So at this point, just make sure that your harvester can actually move, and that's it. Eventually, it's going to work, and we're going to add more things. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. If you're still not a subscriber, you can subscribe. It will support me a lot. You can also leave a like. You can also become a member of the channel and get access to our private Discord channel. And see you next time.